I need some traction. You need some traction.
Hey everyone, this is Lloyd Lobo, co-founder of Traction Conf and Boast AI. Super excited for today's session on how to build long-term customer relationships using your product. Got two experts, leaders in the space, Shane with Intercom and Jeroen with Salesflare. First, Shane is going to give you a masterclass on how to build your customer journey and customer relationships through your product. And then Jeroen is going to go through his onboarding experience and how he created a huge lift of engaged users by just improving onboarding. And then we'll get into Q&A to go into some of the specifics. These guys are going to give us that whole journey. What does it look like from a cold customer to an onboarded customer to a retained and long-term paying customer? Today's webinar is brought to you by Pendo, Boast AI, Launch Academy in partnership with BCF Ventures, Lazaridis Institute, and Founder Institute. Shane, please kick this off.
My name is Shane Murphy-Reuter. I have the pleasure of running marketing over at Intercom, and I'm presuming that there's quite a number of marketers on the call given the topic today, so excited to meet you all. I want to talk about a topic that's pretty dear to our hearts, which is how conversation relationships are changing the way companies are building relationships and driving growth with their customers. And then, as Lloyd mentioned, I think Jeroen is going to get a bit more detail and tactical on actually how they're building onboarding flows. And so I'm going to start a bit higher level and talk a bit more about what is this trend in conversation relationships. You're probably asking yourself, what the heck is a conversation relationship? Well, fear not, that is what we'll be covering today in my talk. So before we get into the details of the emerging conversational movement, I did want to take a bit of a step back first to understand the context in which we are currently working with our customers. This has been changing at a rapid rate over the last 10 years. And particularly this year, with the pandemic has really accelerated that. If you take a big step back, customer relationships have always been the cornerstone to business success. Actually, Intercom itself was founded in a local Dublin coffee shop. The founders were trying to figure out, how do we make online business feel as personal and as engaging as like a local business, like a coffee shop. And that really was the founding story for Intercom. And recently that's become even more important than ever with COVID-19. When the pandemic hit, you had all of these customers who had all of these pretty serious issues, who really needed that help and engagement and support. And at the same time, companies really struggling to give that support given the environment we were in. And this isn't just like my opinion. It's very clear that this is happening in the market at large. Customer expectations are rising big time. You can see some stats here, but like given the people on the call, I'm assuming that like we're all bought into this concept, but rattle off a few here. Customer sector companies are 60% more profitable than companies that don't focus on customers. Seems quite obvious. Brands with a superior customer experience bringing 5 to 6x more revenue than competitors that lag in customer experience. And 96% of customers say customer service is important in the choice of loyalty to a brand. So really expectations are higher than ever from a customer point of view on how they want to be engaged and supported. So we've got these rising expectations, and at the same time you have this issue where switching has never been easier. Access to things like direct-to-consumer brands has made choice explode. Cost and headache of switching are far easier now when you're online and where information is digital and easily transferable. And so you've got this combination of rising expectations, lowering switching costs, and which is putting a huge strain on relationship between customers and companies. And brand loyalty is definitely taking a hit. And now every company is realizing that retention is one of the most important drivers of that success. That's evident even in public markets, where once revenue growth was like paramount and that was the main sort of indicator that investors were looking at. And now we know that things like retention and more importantly, actually net revenue retention, as we're talking here about customer engagement a lot today. That net revenue retention, not only how you keep your customers happy, but actually how you grow them and onboard them over time, is critically important, and it's a key driver not only of your revenue, but on the valuation that you would get when you raise capital or as you go, IPO. And even within Intercom, as we, lay our IPO, this is something that we're, taking very, very seriously as well. But here, here's the kicker. You've got these rising expectations, you've got lowering switching costs, but the tools that we use to manage those relationships predominantly weren't actually built with the end customer in mind. They were built as long ago as like 40 years ago in the case of email. In fact, email was initially invented in 1971, which would make it, 50 years old almost. And it was those tools were really designed to simply handle the scale of the internet. They weren't really thinking about, how do I make the most amazing customer experience? It was like, how the hell do we just manage the scale of everything that we have? And they're not, frankly, they're not great. They're asynchronous and they're not real time. They're kind of impersonal. They're not in the app, right? They're not where the customer is. And they don't really leverage the massive advancement in technology that we've seen over the last 20 years. Online banking, I think, is a great example of this. People significantly prefer the access and convenience of online banking. But when they have an issue or question, or they're trying to figure out how to use the product, they really struggle. And so most people default to going into a branch because the tools that banks use to communicate with customers online are so poor. And I'm sure many of us have experienced that personally. So, how has technology been advancing to meet these user expectations? Well, when you actually look at the consumer world over the last few years, the tools that people use to communicate have significantly advanced. The rise of messengers like WhatsApp, Slack, and also Intercom, we've kind of exited, or we are exiting, I wouldn't say that we have exited fully, the kind of email era, and we're entering what we call this conversational era, which is where messenger is the primary mode of communication. I'm not saying email will go away. I actually think it has a place and it's important. I noticed that there's somebody from Superhuman on the webinar. It will always have its place, and I think there's amazing innovation happening on top of email with the likes of Superhuman. But I think that if you look at how consumers are starting to communicate, there's a whole new era happening that we need to add to our toolkit, which we call a conversational era. Again, a couple of stats here, probably all aware of. 2.9 billion people now use Facebook Messenger and WhatsApp, and then messaging apps overall have overtaken social media platforms in the number of active monthly users by 20%. So this is happening. And so that's happening in the consumer world, with the likes of Messenger and WhatsApp. And that's now been translated into the business world. Like on the collaboration side of things, we're seeing Slack disrupt and change how people are communicating within a business. And then the third leg, which is what we're here mainly to talk about, is that it's now also happening in, it's also a trend that's been seen in how businesses communicate with their customers. In fact, 68% of people in a recent Adweek survey said that they prefer to communicate with businesses through a messenger experience, and so it's already happening. Customers demand this real-time, personalized messenger-based experiences, and so main takeaway from this is that the tools that we have been using to communicate with our customers, the likes of email, the likes of forums, are being displaced by these real-time, friendly, in-the-app experiences that are messenger-based. And it's critically important that as businesses, we take advantage of that trend. And so, how does that relate to conversational? We're seeing that the messengers, which are the product that sit in the bottom right-hand corner of the website, are becoming synonymous with this term conversational. And this is happening not only in conversational marketing, which I'll talk about in a second, but across a bunch of different things. like that you can see here, really that messengers and conversation are becoming synonymous with one another. And almost most importantly for this conversation, conversational is not just conversational marketing. I would expect that most people have heard of conversational marketing. In fact, one of our competitors, I think Drift, have done a pretty good job of like latching onto that term and really building awareness around it. And it's the most well-known conversational solution. But conversational is being applied across the customer lifecycle, from when a prospect is on your website in the first place, which is conversational marketing, to when you're helping onboard them, which is conversational customer engagement, which I'll talk about later, and when they ultimately need your help, which is conversational support. So this is a across the life cycle trend, and it's a technology that you can apply to really engage and help your customers in a way you couldn't before. And like the last thing I would say just on sort of the perceptions around conversational is that a lot of people think of conversational as just live chat. And so, well, okay, live chat, how do we use that to engage our customers? Isn't that just for like answering questions on our website? It's actually way more than that. You know, I like to describe the messenger that sits in the right hand corner, kind of like a Swiss Army knife of formats and tools to allow you to communicate with the customer where they are in the app. Things like in-app messaging, so sending notifications as a customer does something, product tours, being able to walk somebody around your app, whether it be for the first time or as it hits certain milestones, if you want to walk them around how to use new functionality. You can do surveys through it when they're in the app experiencing the product. And yeah, of course, ultimately, if they have questions that they want to just like ask you, it's also there. And you know, you can use automation to handle the common questions, and ultimately live chat is like the fallback for those really challenging questions. But key takeaway here is when you think about conversation, when you think about messengers, it is way more than live chat now. Again, using banking as an example, I kind of like think of the messenger oftentimes as like the ATM outside the bank. It's the one handling common questions, or it's like engaging the customer in quick, friendly ways. And then live chat is kind of like if you really have a problem with your mortgage and you want to sit down with a bank manager and chat through it. But the key thing is that the messenger can kind of do both of those things. And you know, really, this is the future, engaging people in the app when they are in the context of what they're doing in a very friendly, real-time way. And so, yeah, you know, I think so far we've kind of covered how the tools that companies are using today, like email, are not meeting those expectations of customers. We've also covered now how messaging is eating the world and can be the solution to those rising expectations. I want to get now a little bit into more detail around those three solutions that I talked about that you can use across the customer lifecycle. And so we have, as I said, conversational marketing, which is like that first impression when somebody comes to your website and you want to sell to them. You've got conversational customer engagement, which is all about helping onboard the users, understand the product, get ahead of any known issues, and that helps build that lasting bond and relationship. And then finally, conversational support, where you're finally, you know, helping them when they have problems. And I do think it's critical that you see this is a full lifecycle experience. It would be pretty jarring if you set the expectation for a customer when they're on your website, for example, that if they need help or if you're going to help them, that it's in the bottom right-hand corner of the website. And then when they get into the product, it goes away. That is a bad customer experience. And so really in our minds, that best practice is that you see it as it's always there. It's kind of like the login button in the top right, and you've got this powerful Swiss Army knife in the bottom right to help engage and support customers. And so starting with conversational marketing, I'll run through this pretty quickly because I think people are pretty well aware of it. It's the one that's probably seen the most growth and is the best known solution. You can see, you know, across Salesforce, HubSpot, Drift, and obviously Intercom are really kind of talking a lot about this in market. And you can see that the impact of that around that sort of Google Trends and the rise in search volume around this. In fact, even the likes of Gartner are now covering it as an emerging sort of category. But we definitely haven't seen that peak adoption yet. And so lots of sort of opportunities still there for growth. And actually Gartner predict that in the next 2 to 5 years, it will become mainstream. And basically considered table stakes by customers, much like, as I said, having that login link in the top right. It will be considered table stakes that if you go to a website, that you're able to ask questions and sort of get help when you're on the website to decide whether or not to make that purchase decision. And so why do Gartner believe this? Why do we believe this? Why are customers adopting it? Well, mainly because it works. A couple of stats here from our own data is that live chat increases conversion rates on your website by 82%. Like, that's game changing as a marketer. I'm like, oh Jesus, 82%, I'll take that. We'll probably hit my goal for the next 2 years. And then customers, also this is a stat from Forrester, who chat with a business represent a 40% increase in conversion rate. Again, pretty game changing. And so massive opportunity to really make a massive impact on your business, new business revenue through this solution. Moving on to the topic, which is probably more related to what Jeroen will talk about, and I think what we set this session up for is conversational customer engagement. And this is probably the one that conversational messages are least well known for, because, as I said, there's this perception that it's live chat. But actually, this is where the messenger turns being this kind of like inbound question answerer to an outbound proactive tool to help customers discover the power of your product. I mentioned things like it can send in-app messages, it can run in-app tours to help people walk through your product. It can do surveys, all of those sort of things. It's a really powerful way to engage your customers in a way that, like, frankly, email just doesn't have the power to do. It's not in the app. It doesn't have that context of what the person is doing. And so if you're not using this as part of your customer engagement sort of toolkit, I would massively encourage you to do that. And then obviously you also have email for if they're not in the app as a fallback. But this should be, I think, where you start. And so, yeah, so why, again, what's the power of this? Well, we see that fully engaged customers represent 23% higher share in profitability, revenue growth. We know this, and that 80% of future revenue will come from just 20% of your existing customers. We all are aware of the importance of customer engagement, so I won't belabor it too much. But this is a new tactic, I think, that you can use to try and hit these types of numbers. And again, customers are demanding that up-leveling customer engagement. Yet most customers rely on email to do this. Like 64% of customers expect tailored engagements that are based on their past interactions. And there's no better way to do that than when they're actually in the product. And then moving on to conversational support. And I want to talk a little bit about how we think about conversational support, that it's a lot more than actually just answering the questions again. There's now a blending between, I think, support and customer success teams, and that I think is critically important. And I'm sure there are some customer success people on this webinar too, who think about how do they help their customers. And this has become, conversation support has become even more important with COVID. I want to go through a few stats when COVID hit, what we were seeing from some surveys that we did to the support industry at large. And in April, 42% of support leaders believed they would not meet their goals that month due to COVID. It was like, teams were burning out. People were overwhelmed with the volume of sort of inbound sort of questions, and particularly if you're in the travel industry. And we also saw, support leaders saying that their ability to respond had dramatically reduced. So slow response times across B2B and B2C companies, and increased wait times. And why is that? Well, predominantly it's because, as I mentioned, those old tools kind of failing us, particularly in a time like COVID. They, while they were built for sort of that asynchronous communication, things like email don't have the benefit of things like automation, which I'll talk about in a second, on being able to handle questions in an automated way. And so yeah, so what is the answer? And recently, Intercom, we kind of launched this thing that we call the conversational support funnel, which combines proactive support, which is where support starts to bleed into customer engagement. Proactive support would be where you actually get ahead of known potential problems before customers reach out. An example of this would be in the telecoms industry. We have a number of telecoms clients. Telecoms have a huge issue at the month end when they bill their customers, of customers asking questions to how do they understand their bill, why has their bill gone up, and you know that that's going to happen, so you can set up proactive messages to go out to the customer, whether it be a product tour to walk them through how to understand their bill, or if there is a spike, a message explaining why there's been a spike in the bill. And if that doesn't sort of get ahead of the known issues, then you kind of have this concept of self-serve support. If they ask a question, you can have automated bots that answer the questions, and then finally human. And so, yeah, I got ahead of myself here. So I talked a little bit about proactive support. Self-serve support, as I said, this is where you can set up bots to automatically answer any questions. You can also link people to help center articles if they have those that can help answer those questions as well. This is where we can see a dramatic improvement in the number of problems that actually make it through to your humans. And on average, we see our customers solve about a third of their questions through this, which, if you're a support leader, that is game changing to be able to cut out a third of problems before they get to you. Which is important, the human support at the very end, which is where if you do have a problem that isn't like a rote problem that you need to talk to somebody about, that you can. So that's it for me. You know, I think overall, the future is conversational.
That was fantastic, Shane. We kickstarted with conversational marketing because it's important to build relationships with the customer from the time they're cold all the way across each step of the funnel, from signing up to onboarding to retention to them paying you and becoming a long-term customer. So we kickstarted with the theory behind that. Now, Jeroen is going to talk about specifically onboarding. You know, I often hear I need to focus on retention, but between signing up and having a retained user, the key misstep is that onboarding. And if you nail that piece, then you're likely to have longer lasting relationships. Jeroen's going to talk about specifically their case study on what they did to improve onboarding, to increase customer retention and long-term customer loyalty. And then we'll get into some questions around onboarding and other steps in the customer journey piece in the Q&A. So Jeroen, please take it away.
I will talk about a few experiments we did at Salesflare recently. First of all, I'm Jeroen, co-founder and CEO of Salesflare. We build, for those people who don't know Salesflare, it's basically an easier and more automated CRM, one that doesn't really need all the data input that you're used to in other CRMs. My background personally is in sales, in agencies and building software, and a big believer, like the guys at Intercom, that software can be much more human. Just as a bit of background, we focus a lot on ease of use. We are currently, I think, on G2 scored the 3rd or the 4th most easy to use CRM, much easier to use than competition. But we really like to go much further than that, because there's still a huge sort of potential left in improving this. To give you a bit of an idea of our conversion rate, so of our trials, there's an enormous amount of shoppers, so people who are looking at different CRMs. So there's just about 40% that really does something in the CRM, 60% is just there to have a look. Of these, 50% actually use the software, so they start tracking customers, which is a very good indicator for us that they will subscribe, because 50% of those subscribes, and it's even a bit more now, which means that in the end, 10% of trial subscribes. And this is for a big part because there's so much CRM shopping. Well, people love our onboarding in general, but we always believe that we can do way better. Like said, there's big potential in working on churn. But then next to that, the other big thing where you can make a lot of difference, especially if you already have sort of the traffic, is improving your onboarding and improving the conversion there. Because let's say you increase the conversion rate from 10 to 12%, that can often mean big things to your growth, especially if you now start to subtract your churn. It's more than just a 20% increase on your growth rate. There's 2 onboarding experiments that I'm going to talk about here now today. One is where we sort of try to show the product before you create an account in Salesflare, just to show the walkthrough first, and only then ask to create an account to connect your emails. And then the second one is a gamified setup guide that we created. We offer a CRM, which is a bit more of a complex product. It needs a bit of guiding through the setup. It's not something that you do automatically. So we came up with a guide that gets you through it, but also incentivizes you on the way. I'll share exactly why we did it first each time, then I'll show it to you, and then I'll share the results that I measured. So first, the walkthrough first. So showing the product before creating an account. Why? 2 reasons. One, from the start, we only made it possible to create a Salesforce account by connecting your emails, which not everybody completely wants to do. So we have some people that are blocked from signing up, but it makes a lot of sense for us because basically you go to the site, you connect your emails, and boom, everything works. While if you would say like you can create an account and then maybe at some point you connect your emails, you don't get the full value. So we decided you need to connect your emails to create an account. Second thing, for many people then who want to just see the software, they're sort of shopping around. We wanted to take that barrier away, that they don't come to that page and they're like, oh, I need to connect my emails. I just want to see the thing. Now we'll just open it up for them and they can have a look. And then if they like it, they can connect their emails. So how does that look? Let me switch to the right place. No, it's not the right place. Here. So when you land on our website, you basically see less work, more sales and all that. And on the top right here, you can click to try our software for free. Now, if you go to our website now, we have an experiment running. So in 50% of the cases, you will be asked to connect your emails first and then see the walkthrough. 50% of the cases, you'll see the walkthrough first and then you can sign up. You cannot force it by refreshing because it's cookie based. So if you see one version, you see that version. Now at the end, I'll share a link with you with which you can force the walkthrough version if you want to check it out. So you click try it for free here. You land on the walkthrough. So we show a few of the benefits first before you start. So the fact that we do the data input for you, that we bring over you in your sales pipeline, and that it helps you sort of to see how you're doing. It's a bit of the Google material design way of showing you the benefits of a product. And then we'll show you around. And what we focus on here very much is one, showing you the value of Salesflare very quickly. and at the same time show you how it's supposed to be used. Because the main indicator for us that you're going to become a customer is when you actually start to track customers. So we show you how to do that. So when I click take it for a spin here, you'll see the full Salesflare interface, but in a limited way. So a lot of what you'd normally be able to click on is sort of hidden, so you cannot click on it. And we only allow you to click on the things you're supposed to click on. So you see here, here's your first account. An account is a company you're selling to, like it says. Salesflare automatically collects that information on the accounts for you by getting it from a database. And then, based on the website, it will also see in your mailbox who has an email address at that company, and then automatically suggest them to them. And all you need to do is click on the check mark to add the person. So I'll do that. Then based on that, Salesflare goes look in your emails, your calendar, your phone, social media, and everything, and create a timeline for you. And then to follow up opportunities, you create one. The easiest thing is not entering anything. That works. It will just say new opportunity. And these opportunities are shown here in a sort of pipeline overview, visual pipeline overview, which is also drag and drop, which shows you in which stage your opportunity is in the pipeline. And then if you have a lot of them, sort of brings that overview. Now we put this thing here, drag opportunity here, very clearly, because before people were just dragging, and we would say, like, if it's here, it says, drag this opportunity to one, people would not read it and then be like, what is this? So we put this very clear thing here, drag opportunity here, and you do that. And then you get the nice fireworks, which gives people a sense of accomplishment. And it's only at that moment in the sort of walkthrough first version that we ask you to connect to your emails. And that is very simple. Just click. I choose an email address here. This is in Dutch. It says, do you want to give Salesflare access to these things? Salesflare needs access, so it can automate your CRM. I give access, and from there I land in Salesflare as if I was always in there, but now actually with my own account. So that's the walkthrough part that I showed. You already see sort of where we're going afterwards, but I'll keep that for later. So the results of this walkthrough experiment is actually that 11% less people create an account when we show the walkthrough first. So we have some of these shoppers that have a look and are like, nah, not really for me. But the great thing is that the trials convert way more often. We actually, over the last 2 months, I've been pulling data, some updated data today. Trials convert 40% more often. That means that if you take from website visitor, so the first thing, the 11% less is from website visitor to trial, and the 40% more is from trial to paid. If you do the 0.89 times the 1.40, you get to 1.25. So 25% higher conversion from a website visitor to a paid account, which is a huge win. We're still collecting the data there, so we didn't fully make the switch right now from the asking the emails first and then the walkthrough and the other thing. We're still collecting data, but that's what we see for now. Now, an important note for when you try to do something like that yourself, we didn't think the data tracking through all the way. It was set up okay-ish, but not completely. So we lost a lot of data in the first 1 or 2 months that we ran this. And we weren't able to track the whole impact from visit to trial, which made that initially we looked at it and we were like, oh, we get less trials, that's bad. But then we thought they're probably more qualified. So we extended our data measuring, and we're now able to pull it all the way through, where in the end it seems like it's a big win. So when we do this again, I will certainly take a bit more time than we already took to think through the impact measurements. Now, second experiment is the Gamified setup guide, which guides and incentivizes people through the setup steps. There's actually 4 reasons there why we built this. The first one is people land in Salesflare. It's all easy. You connect your email account, you land in there, there's stuff, and then you click a bit around, and then you're like, and now what? That's a remark we often got from customers. They're like, this looks cool, but where do I get started? So for these people, we have a guide that clearly shows them what's next. Then a second reason is, as people complete setup steps, they see more of the value. So they see that initial value in the walkthrough, but then afterwards, there's much more to explore. And if you don't take people through it, then it's a bit hard. Like back in the day, I would take people manually through the product. I would say, okay, this is what the product does, gonna sell it. Then I would say, like, shall I demo it to you? And then I would do that, and then sort of set up the thing. Now we are trying to recreate that with this guide somehow. Third thing, there's specific things in there that we want to incentivize more than others, like people inviting colleagues during the trial. That's something that we then not only put at the right place in the sort of sequence, but also we give it more of a reward. I think for inviting colleagues, you get 4 extra trial days, while for many other things, you just get 1 day extra. And a fourth thing that we saw when we analyzed data is and this is even before we launched the setup guide, is the better people are set up during the trial, the higher the conversion, but also the lower the churn in the long run. So a better onboarding is not just important to convert people now, but also what we're discussing apart from that, the churn is impacted by this as well. So the more things people do within the trial before they subscribe, the longer they'll stay. We even saw, and it's funny that the people that sign up the fastest, so they get on a trial and then put in their credit card right away, are also the people that churn the fastest. So now I'll switch again to showing that to you. So I don't know if you remember, but we did the walkthrough, we connected the emails, and then we landed on this screen. At the top here, it says that Salesflare is finished syncing, and you can go check out your contacts. I'll close that. But at the bottom left here, oh, the trial will expire. The bottom left here, it shows the setup guide. So it's a setup guide with 12 steps, which might seem like a lot, but it's we picked out the essential steps to set up Salesflare, and most of them are also pretty quick. So when you click a step, and I'll pick an easy one here, step number 5, configure the pipeline. It goes straight to the place where you do that. And the setup guide minimizes into the small thing here. That sort of stays there to then indicate the next step. So if I do a simple way of configuring the pipeline, I update this. You can see at the bottom left now, whoop, the step goes away and it shows the next step. And I actually got 9 trial days now. I also got a notification, and actually, if you have the team on the app as well, you get everybody gets a notification. If I would have colleagues in the team now, they would say like, Jeroen earned 2 days for the team. Everybody would be like, cheer. Now, if people don't know exactly how to install the mobile app, they can read the article here, which opens in a separate tab, or open the YouTube video, which opens like this in an overlay. You can just check it out, see how it works, go there and install the mobile app. Simple as that. And like that, you can basically go through all the different steps. Now, what does this mean for our results? We now have about 3 months of data, and I take May to July because the more recent ones they're not fully completed. They might not have converted to a customer at all yet. They might still be in a trial. So if you look at the May to July data, about 17% more teams have started tracking customers. And as I explained before, this is for us a main metric to see whether people are using the software when they actually start creating accounts, companies are selling to in the software, and then to then follow them up. This is for us the main indicator that they're gonna become a customer. Another huge thing that not only influences the conversion rate, but also lowers the churn and ups our revenue is people inviting team members. 54% more teams do that since we launched the setup guide. This is compared to the initial number, obviously. In terms of paying teams, when we look at teams that started paying, we can see that of the 10 setup steps, and I'm disregarding the first setup step that is basically you start your trial, and the 12th one that is you subscribed. The 10 other steps, they now complete 6.3 on average of these steps, while before the setup guide they do it only 4. Which again means that teams are better set up before they become a customer, better set up during the trial, which in the end should lower our churn if we sort of extrapolate the conclusions we got from other data. Of course, we cannot go all the way into churn yet because we only released this end of April. And then in terms of short-term sort of trial to paid conversion, that didn't have this massive effect, but it did go up with 5%, which then on top of that 25% we got from the other experiment is obviously a nice gain. I've recently been reading this book, and I enjoyed it so much that I want to recommend it to everyone. It's The Art of Game Design. It's about game design, but it offers you basically a guide that is both great for people who are probably into game design and people who are not into game design. It's super well written, and it offers you 100 lenses of designing your game better. I personally, I use those to apply them on Salesflare, which gave a huge amount of interesting conclusions that I'm looking to implement. And I'd totally recommend you to do the same. So if you want to give our onboarding a try, save this link. It's salesflare.re, so Salesflare with a dot in it here /onboard. It will always send you to the walkthrough version, so it makes that you can get a good test and recreate what I just did. And if you like great software, obviously stick around.
That was great, and I like the personalized examples you gave. Let's get Shane back on and tackle some of these questions. So we have good examples here on onboarding. So I want to start with Jeroen here. What specific tools did you use? Because I saw a lot of this checklist process and the sort of modal-driven checklist onboarding behavior. What are the tools you're using to manage?
I think for some of these little tooltip things, we used something called shepherds.js or so, but all the rest is custom. So we all build it ourselves. We don't believe in this sort of solutions that you just find somewhere, and then we often like to go further than these things allow you to do, and then you have to build it custom. Especially the setup guide, it ties in very deeply with our software. So it's not something we could have picked somewhere and then integrated.
Definitely. Now, I want to dive back into the whole sort of end-to-end customer relationships. You did a great job on speaking of just the onboarding piece, but there are several elements here. I particularly like, though, some of that onboarding mechanisms you have built in the product to get people using it. Now, flipping over to Intercom, Shane, can Intercom handle the bulk of this? And I know I'm pitching your product, but I love Intercom, and you guys have been great speakers for many Traction conferences. But walk through for me the customer journey from sort of a visitor to a signed up user, and then a signed up user all the way to an engaged user, and how people are leveraging your solution. And then maybe we can flip that over to Jeroen and see what he's using as well to manage that process.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I did bite my tongue, and I didn't want to jump in there. I know Jeroen has built some custom stuff, and even within Intercom, we've built some custom stuff where we just want a bit more like personalization. But I will say that the Intercom product itself does do things like product tours, and you can set up, triggering behavior based upon what people are hovering over or doing in your app, so that it can trigger certain specific messages, or maybe I'll give you an example of a product we're launching next week and how we're using Intercom to onboard people to that product. So we have a campaign builder, which essentially allows you design lifecycle campaigns. So you can start with, I want to first send an email, then I want to send a product tour, then I want to have a bot automated sort of send out a message. So we have a campaign builder that allows us to do that, and we string together for our onboarding all of those different types of messaging. So yes, if they're outside of the app, we will send them emails. So like we in advance of our product launch next week, we'll have an email that will go out teasing it 4 days in advance. Similarly, when somebody comes into the app, we'll have an in-app message teasing the product launch and saying that it's coming. Then on the day, we'll obviously segment our different users. If you're already using our campaign builder, you'll get a totally different in-app experience to if you've not used it before. And then we predominantly actually leverage, not similar to what Jeroen showed, but our main way of onboarding customers is then in-app product tours. So we will show people, hey, the step by step, you go here to set it up, then you go here, this is what it will do, then you can look at reports here, to walk them through it, and you put videos in there so it's kind of rich and all of that. And so we mainly use our own product in the app to help onboard and engage those customers through the experience. And then, as I said, we will use fallback on email in case they didn't see the in-apps or whatever. So it's kind of stringing to all those things together to drive that engagement.
And then with your new campaign builder, just curious, where does ads or advertising fit in, or that's a future roadmap item?
Yeah, we actually don't really have an intention to do off-site communication like ads. My previous job actually worked for AdRoll, so I've spent a lot of time in the ad world, and it's a great industry. But I do think that is there are tools that are amazing for doing that. Go use AdRoll if you want to actually do advertising on the internet. We really specialize in, once somebody's on your site or in your app, what's the experience, whether or not they're asking questions or you're proactively engaging them with things like product tours.
But you do have a Zapier integration possibly, right? Or like...
Yeah, yes. And you could use the data within Intercom to trigger ad campaigns. So yeah, you could use, for example, in Intercom, you could create segments based upon the information like customer size, customer segment, all of that sort of thing, and then trigger that off into using some sort of CDP to then push that into a DSP like AdRoll to go and buy ads against. Yes.
Yeah, so what I was thinking through is like, okay, I landed on your website, I haven't signed up, I bounced. Well, I could take that data to run ads to them and then somehow tie them once they finally sign up. But then if they're not engaged, sort of beyond just email and in-app messaging, what else can we do to dominate this sphere? So let's hop over to Jeroen for a moment and address that same question. Is like, how do you drive customers to the site, get them to sign up, and you talked about the onboarding piece in depth, but beyond the onboarding, like how do you spot and keep people engaged? How do you spot like somebody's not engaged and keep them engaged? So let's take that step by step.
Yeah, so that's a lot of questions, but I'll focus on the onboarding beyond what I showed. So we first of all we use Intercom. In Intercom we have a campaign set up in which we make a distinction between three types of messages. One, general messages from Team Salesflare, just general tips. And these get fired at you based on what you do. We send you different sort of types of messages. So if you haven't done anything, or you have done a lot, or you've already installed a mobile app, or you haven't, you get different sort of messages. Second, we have personal emails that introduce Taylor, who takes care of you as a customer manager. That's a second type. And then a third type is automated chat messages. We used to reach out to customers sort of on like pulling a segment in Intercom and then going through that and see, oh, how's this guy doing? How's this guy doing? But over time, we've learned sort of our routine there, and we've automated that in the campaign. So if people reach a certain stage, they'll get a certain message, which looks very human, but it is automated. And from the moment they reply, we pick up and we actually have the conversation and help people. It is based on how far they are, what they have been doing, maybe some kind of points where, for instance, when they're doing an import, then often it's good that we're there to help. This kind of points, they get automated chat messages. Next to that, we do sort of what you were just discussing. So what we have set up is a Facebook pixel, first of all. This Facebook pixel, we probably have three audiences. One is our blog audience to retarget content and show Salesflare now and then. Then we have it on the side, and I think focus on the pricing page right now to make sure that people see testimonials, intro video, this kind of things in Facebook for a while. We also have it on landing pages with sort of two sequences. One first that shows some content, and then stuff that tries to convert them. But then an interesting one onboarding wise is when you are on a trial with Salesflare, there is a pixel also in our app that specifically triggers. So we can almost identify everyone with the Facebook pixel there, and then also show them onboarding videos in Facebook. So even when you're scrolling through Facebook, you can see like the next step of setting up Salesflare basically. And next to all that, another thing we do is every single person that starts a trial on Salesflare, at least when we have a first name, a last name, and a company name, sort of automatically there, they get an automated LinkedIn request from me, which is a helpful one, which sort of builds a connection with people and offers the ability to give feedback or get help. And from there, sometimes conversations start as sort of an extra human connection that our bigger competitors cannot offer.
Awesome. One question here is, a lot of this touched around like self-service or product-led companies. What if your platform is sort of complex and you don't have a way for a customer to sign up and go through this in an automated fashion. Shane, what do you recommend, or how would you recommend a person or company set up their flow or use Intercom in a way for companies, or building that relationship really when you don't have an automated sign up flow?
I'm trying to think of a product that is so complex that you couldn't use the types of product tours that like Jeroen was showing. I think it probably just means that you'd have a more segmented, depending upon the sort of the user, what you might do. That said, like I also think that at a certain point you do, and this is the power of kind of what I talked about around like proactive support versus human support. I think if you're proactively trying to help them around the product, but if it fails, like for whatever reason you've misjudged what they're trying to do, having that ability for them to then actually chat to a human is huge. And whether that means it's live or you just have the ability to set up some time directly in the messenger with a Calendly link or whatever with a customer success rep, that's important. Like we actually do that within Intercom. If you are a customer of, we've identified you as a certain potential size customer, but you're self-service today, we will allow you essentially set up, and we'll proactively try to get you to set up time with the customer success rep so that we show you how to properly get all the value out of it. There's value for the customer, but also obviously revenue potential for us. So I think it's a combination of trying to do as much as you can proactively with things like Jeroen took us through, but then making sure that there's a fallback into human if needed.
Yeah, definitely. Jeroen, can we take a couple of questions before the sign up?
Yeah.
What are some things you're doing, sort of taking a user, one, to drive traffic to your site and make sure they sign up? Right? We talked a lot about onboarding and then the next steps on getting them engaged, but what are you doing to get them to sign up?
For us, it's a lot of content marketing. We have different types there. There's the type that converts the best, I would say, is the one that is quite focused around sales mostly. And sort of while it's explaining a specific concept, it showcases our product also along the way. So for instance, if you search for sales pipeline, and then there's an article about what explains first what is a sales pipeline, why is it important, how do you build it, and then along the way it starts showing like, oh, a sales pipeline, this is how it looks in Salesflare. You sometimes need to flush it. Look, that's how you can do that. And those are some of the types of content that convert better, but then we obviously also have other types of content that are not at all much linked to Salesflare, which create a first touch point. We try to retarget those people on Facebook, like I said, but we also have some reasons for people to leave their email address to then get on an email newsletter. This email newsletter shows new pieces of content, but also at the bottom our latest product updates to sort of showcase that a bit more. Those are some good ways to drive traffic. Apart from that, we get a lot of it from word of mouth, review sites, other blogs. We don't do a whole lot of paid stuff because that's quite expensive, and we have very big competitors that have way much more money there to spend, which makes it a difficult game.
Definitely. Like, I feel like retargeting is the way to go. I'm gonna push this question to Shane around. Basically, email doesn't get a lot of love, but I personally have been a big fan of email. I'll tell you why. My company, Boast AI, which also produces Traction Conf, and combined, more than 50% of our growth, interestingly, comes from email. And as a small startup, you only focus on one or two channels that you can absolutely dominate. And we find that a lot of sort of personalized messaging, and I classify them all as messaging, right? Like in-app, on social channels or email, have a high conversion rate. Can Intercom be used from a perspective where it's not a self-service product, let's say, right? And there is nothing that a user can trial. So could we load up a bunch of emails in Intercom to run outbound campaigns to then drive them to your website, then leverage maybe a Zapier integration to trigger retargeting via pixels on LinkedIn and Facebook? But could we start in Intercom a nurturing journey just from the email to run outbound?
Theoretically, you could. Honestly, I wouldn't use Intercom for that. Not selling the product, right? But like being honest, if you essentially have an email database and you're trying to figure out how do you nurture that email database to sort of sign up for your product, whether or not that be self-serve or just like essentially talk to sales or something, I'd be taking those emails and I'd be putting them into either directly into the likes of Facebook, where they can do email matching in Facebook. LinkedIn can do the same. And then also there are tools like AdRoll actually, which use data like LiveRamp, where they have about a 25% email to cookie matching. So they'll probably be able to match about a quarter of those emails to a cookie online to allow you retarget them online and get them back to the site. And so, you know, I think that there's no real reason to go through an Intercom to do that. You could put them all in Intercom, or if they exist there, to your point, using a Zapier to pull them out and push them into the likes of an AdRoll, the likes of a Facebook, the likes of a LinkedIn. But you'd be using more the likes of LinkedIn, Facebook, AdRoll directly, I think, to do what you're describing.
Sounds good. Sounds good. One last question here, and then we can close it off for the session. But the question here from David, he says, we're in the enterprise space, but user experience of onboarding is something super important. What key takeaways would you suggest from your experience with the enterprise? Now, both of you sell to enterprise, more Intercom likely, but where people have a long life cycle and low churn, specifically when it comes to gamification, right? We believe there's no reason why your job should be boring, even if you work for a monolithic corporation. So what balance, effectively, David is asking, what balance do you recommend for gamification at the enterprise level?
Yeah. I'll first answer your previous question briefly, by the way. You can use Salesflare to send outbound emails if you want. We launched this feature in April. So if you want to send a sequence of emails from within your CRM, that's possible. When it comes to gamification in the enterprise, I definitely like the idea of giving people sort of more of a nice experience there. I do believe that it's less important for enterprise though, that you're more likely to have, for instance, if we compare in our space, in the enterprise, you would find Salesforce. Salesforce is not necessarily always super fun to use, but it does not matter that much because it's not bought by the end user. It's bought by management who wants to build their workflows into the company. It needs to be highly adaptable. It needs to cover all the needs that the organization has, and the end user is sort of secondary. But I am of the belief that it's gonna come. It cannot be that people keep having great software at home and then head to the enterprise and have this horrible software. So I do believe that people are gonna start requesting it, but it's still there's a way to go, I would say. If you wanna be a pioneer there, I'd certainly encourage you, but I wouldn't expect like the huge returns immediately at gamifying your enterprise application.
Shane, what are your thoughts? Because you guys sell to enterprise as well. I mean, lots of large companies, but at the same time, you're a very product-led organization where it's going bottom up. kind of thing, right? Like anyone can sign up, use it, both your products. So, but what are your thoughts from at an enterprise level? How do you guys tackle that at Intercom?
Yeah, I would say we've got two go-to-market motions. One is product-led, kind of self-serve, and then one is sales-led. Actually, if you truly want to use our product at an enterprise level and scale, you actually have to buy through sales to get advanced access to a lot of the advanced sort of features. Because of exactly what David says, the onboarding is more hand-holding, etc. But I like to back to David's question. I could not agree more with the sentiment of the question. In fact, my whole presentation was about the kind of these rising consumer expectations and how they're being pulled into the business space, and how the old tools like email just weren't built for that. And I agree, to Jeroen's point, the likes of Salesforce, they were built for scale, and they were built for kind of like enterprise or whatever. And they didn't really think about that end user experience in the same way. And I think that there's no reason why you can't have both. Absolutely no reason. Jeroen made a really important point there, which is to distinguish the difference between the ultimate buyer and the end user. So like, I personally am the buyer of a software like an ad roll or an Intercom. I do not use it. It's been about 10 years since I've used the bloody thing. If my team came to me and said, Shane, we love using this software, we really want it, I'd go, well, that's great. Okay, I'll listen. Now show me the benefit and the ROI. If you can show both, you've won the deal, right? Mm-hmm. And frankly, also, I think as marketers and as leaders, we all know that it's still important that we keep some sort of level of understanding of how the tools work. And so I actually think that if you can do both, you smash it. And that's what Intercom have always tried to do. And I think that it's one of the reasons that we've kind of grown in the way that we have. So I could not agree more with David. I think that you can definitely do both.
And we're in a world where, I think 15 years ago when I first started my career in product, I worked for an enterprise company. We were selling products to the supply chain, worked with the Tiffany's, Armani's of the world. And we were selling to the financial buyer and the CIO, multi-million-dollar worth of software. And then you have these factory warehouse workers using the software. And what we noticed was that people will pay for it at the enterprise level. And at that time, 10, 15 years ago, people weren't monitoring usage as much. They were just like firing their employees for not using it, or just creating negative sentiments for not using. But as soon as you improve the user experience, they would start using it and get a lift. And then you can use those sort of reporting to say, hey, to proactively, basically from a customer success standpoint, say you have X% of users using it to generate Y outcome, and send those reports proactively up to the financial buyer. And now you win on both sides. And when we did that, companies were renewing these multi-million-dollar software deals year over year. So I think I agree with both of you guys' point that you got to do both. And if you look at the companies that have IPO'd and done really well over the past 10 years, most of them have been very experiential. Like if you look at Twilio or Zendesk or Dropbox, Zoom, etc., they've all been very experiential. So the world is moving that way. I think the world is going to eventually get to a point where if you need a consultant to implement your software, you have lost as a software company. And this is a bold statement I'm making here, but this has been a great session, guys. Shane and Jeroen, thanks so much for giving us the time. Learned a ton. Thank you all for joining us.
I need some traction.